Hi, welcome to Ketobiography. I'm your host, Robyn Dobyns. This week's guest is a passionate recovery coach and the founder of Beyond Binge Eating, dedicated to helping women free from binge eating and sugar addiction with a body-informed and science-based approach. She combines compassion with impressive expertise, holding a PhD in somatic psychology, a master's in exercise science, and multiple certifications in nutrition, mindfulness, and relapse prevention to blend neuroscience, metabolic health, and somatic healing into practical tools for sustainable recovery. Having walked the recovery road herself, she speaks candidly about her journey and now shares powerful real life strategies and hope through her holistic coaching, her blog, and as the host of the Beyond Binge Eating podcast. Please welcome Kristina Dobyns to Ketobiography. Hello, welcome.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me, Robyn.
Oh, it's just I'm just excited to have you on. So just for the listeners to know, Kristina reached out to me on LinkedIn one day. Just I don't know, I had just like rejoined that community and I was like, "Oh my gosh." My answer was just like, "Oh my gosh, could you imagine if my name was spelled like your name?" Like I get made fun of enough. So she spells Dobyns with a Y, and I spell Robyn with a Y, and oh, that would just be. So that's what kicked off a little budding friendship here, and
Yes.
I'm just infinitely curious about you, your personal story, and then what you do professionally. And I mean, gosh, you've like immersed yourself in your passion by
Yeah.
this continuing education
Yeah.
and certifications and that kind of stuff
Right.
so it's all just kind of one story, so I'm going to just turn it over to you and let you start sharing.
Oh, thank you so much. By the way, I wonder if we are like long lost cousins or something, because it is kind of strange that we do have the same last name.
I believe my husband had told me that some of his ancestors spelled it with the
Okay.
Y, so
Okay. So we're related.
it's quite possible.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is true that I feel like I really have immersed myself in this. I think just there, it just I felt absolutely compelled. It wasn't like a conscious decision. It's just like, I have to do this. Um, yeah, I'm a lifelong learner, and I just feel like infinitely passionate about learning everything that I can about the topic of recovery from binge eating and food addiction. And I think a lot of it, well, I know a lot of it came from my own desire to heal myself. Um, and I think the healing never ends. So like I'm still on that path, and I want to share it. So I had I'd started kind of like, I don't know if you want to call it a spiritual journey, but like when we're kind of like in our adolescence, we kind of start exploring different things. So I think that was kind of the beginning of it. Um, I guess I'm taking you down kind of my educational path first before I kind of go down the traumatic path. But started sort of educating myself around communication and mindfulness and yeah, just different ways of thinking. Starting young, I ended up getting my bachelor's in psychology, and thought that I thought that I was going to get my PhD in psychology at that time. I was offered several fellowships, but I was actually burned out by school. So I turned down those fellowships and went down a different path, and actually got into personal training, got my master's in exercise science, and did kind of like the professional athlete thing, if you can believe it. I was a professional breakdancer. I was a high level athlete in other ways. I broke 3 national records in powerlifting. I was a multiple time champion in bodybuilding. I was into mixed martial arts and all that stuff. And so that was my life for a long time. But then basically binge eating got the best of me. And I was just like, I can't. Am I allowed to cuss on this podcast, by the way, or
Sure,
no?
why not?
Okay, I
Go
was like, I
ahead.
can't fucking do this anymore. I can't fucking do this. Whereas like I'm trying to prep for shows or prep to prep for a show. And it's just like my eating was out of control and it just felt like completely unmanageable. And so the fire for that just kind of died. Um, and yeah, the binge eating just, that was just a constant plague. And it kind of came to a peak in around 2020, the worst year of my life. My mom died. My eating disorder was just completely unmanageable. There's other things that, well, obviously COVID and COVID, and there's like other things that happened too. And I just felt like so suicidal. So I ended up going to residential treatment, and I I didn't want to give up and die, you know, like I didn't like I was like, my mind was searching like, what can I do? Like literally I've done everything. So like, you know, long story short, but like there was like, I had tried like all the therapies, I had done, you know, medication, I had done, you know, homeopathic sort of treatments. I had done like neurofeedback. I had done a million and one things, like you name it, I've tried it. And nothing seemed to work. Psychedelics, you know, like, and I was like, you know, I felt like my own embodiment was something that was something that I could improve upon. And so then that led me down to seek getting my doctorate in somatic psychology, because somatic psychology does focus a lot on embodiment. And so then I ended up getting my doctorate in somatic psychology, and I focused on binge eating recovery and food addiction recovery and everything. You know, I just studied all that I could and relate, you know, mindfulness and somatic practices, dance or art or anything, the brain that could help illuminate the path towards recovery from addictive patterns, especially regarding food. I ended up writing my dissertation on sensory strategies for coping with urges to binge eat, which is actually more of I would say a framework that comes from occupational therapy, because a lot of times in occupational therapy, they'll focus on using the senses to help with nervous system regulation for children, for example, who have outbursts or who are on the spectrum or who have sensory processing challenges. So they'll engage the senses. And I felt like that was a very like compelling sort of approach. And so then I found it was very, very helpful for me. And so then I studied it in my dissertation. And you know, I've actually never stopped learning. Like I still do certifications. I've done, you know, mindfulness-based relapse prevention was great, mindful self-compassion. I recently just did with Dr. Eric Garland, the mindfulness-oriented recovery enhancement for addiction, stress, and pain. I just do a million in like too much, like any more than any reasonable person should do. Like it's insane. It's like it's too much. But that's the education part. And I would just say that just going back in time, I think that you know, my childhood, you know, I suffered trauma. I learned how to dissociate early. I think that I learned that from my dad, who was an alcoholic. And I, you know, started doing drugs and alcohol early and binge eating early. I don't remember a lot from my childhood, but that's when it all started. And I've been in this process of trying to re-inhabit my body, you know, and um, yeah, just do whatever I need to be well. And so to me, that has led me down the path of really trying to improve my awareness, my interoceptive awareness, engage in holistic practices to nourish my body in a way that works for me and my brain chemistry, especially given my, you know, early exposure to trauma and dissociation and to drugs and alcohol and all that. And so that's kind of led me to where I am, and just given 100,000 million percent to the journey and to, yeah, just like learning as much as I can.
It sounds like continuing education is actually part of your healing, your personal healing process. So when you're talking about this, you kind of brush over it a little bit. So hopefully poking me a little isn't a hard question for you. But I mean, you're talking about all these amazing things that you're a professional athlete. You're doing all of these amazing things, but you also have this other thing going on, this binge eating disorder. And
Right.
then we go to, oh my gosh, she's suicidal. So how does one go from that from to there? I mean, what was going on with you at that time?
Yeah, it was so that was like a challenge for me. And eating, for me, the eating disorder was a huge secret, as they commonly are, and a reason why there's, so much stigma, and there's so much stigma and shame and all that, especially for me being someone who, and this all started, like I said, when I was young. However, I did go into the fitness industry and I was a professional athlete. Just I felt, yeah, like I was already strong as a youth. I did gymnastics as a kid. Engaging in strength and power sports felt very natural to me. And now, as I look back as someone more informed about the nervous system and like knowing that I really benefit from proprioceptive tools, I can see why things like weightlifting and jujitsu and that sort of thing really helped me, right? So I loved that sort of thing, right? I loved it. But it's like, and also I had this pattern that was ingrained in my nervous system from when I was young. So they were both there, but I did feel like ashamed, and it was a secret. It's not like I was super open about that sort of thing. The people closest to me, um, I mean, only a few really knew that I struggled. And yeah, so it was just something that binge eating was just something that was always in the background. It was always there. It was always kind of like the thorn in my side. I always wondered how much more could I go further in my career, or how much further, how much more friendships could I create, or opportunities would I have? Because it was always there. For example, I was always isolating myself because that's what you do when you have it, oftentimes when you have an eating disorder, like, or I was being flaky with people because I didn't, all of a sudden I don't want to show up because I felt so shitty. You know what I'm saying? So I appeared like unreliable, or I was, not wanting to engage with certain relationships, but it truly was the eating disorder that was running the show. Or yeah, there was just so many times that I missed opportunities, or messed up with things. So yeah, like that was just something that was there that I wish it hadn't been. But like I said, I just continued, and then at some point I stopped. So in 2016 is kind of like when I stopped my bodybuilding career and actually stopped being in the fitness industry, because I actually started an online business. And so I did that for several years. And like I said, the binge eating was just kind of like this thing that was always there. And sometimes it was worse and sometimes it was better, but it never went away, and it was always there. And I fucking hated it. And then in 2020, yeah, it just came to a head, I think because, yeah, I had been dealing with for so long. It had been like, 20 years already that I had been dealing with it, and really, really, really all the time trying to do something about it. It's not like I was like, oh, it's fine. Like, I'm not going to do anything. Like, I started going to therapy for it when I first recognized it as the eating disorder that it was. I think I was about 19 or something like that. That's when I started seeing a therapist. And it was just like sequentially different things that I would try. I would go and do CBT, for a while. Okay. And then I would do this other thing, and I'd do different things. Like I never stopped trying to recover. And I think in 2020, it just felt like I'm fucking done. Like I don't want to do this anymore, because it's not fun to want something with every cell and fiber of your being and to not be able to do it, especially given the fact of my successful accomplishments in my whole life, of feeling I am a champion. I'm someone who, when I want something, I can do it, and then to be like, except for this thing that feels like it's running my life, and some I can't get over it. I don't know why. I try as hard as I can. I can't. It just felt like, the Jekyll and Hyde, like there was just some mysterious force within me that was unknowable, or like, just, yeah, it just felt like it was, I couldn't overcome it. So I just, yeah, got really sick of it. And that, coupled with the uncertainty, the unprecedented, trauma and uncertainty of COVID, coupled with, my mother dying, which was absolutely horrendous. And the other things, that it's just like, I just felt like, I had basically given up hope, I'd kind of given up hope. And so that's what led to really feeling like, yeah, I don't know what else to do. I don't know what else to do. And so that's how I ended up going to residential. And it actually was a good choice, because it allowed me to be in a safe place for a while, so that I could kind of work on, getting stable and changing my mindset. And by the time that I emerged, I was ready to move on with my life.
Oh, that's amazing that, a lot of people say they'll go into treatment and they come out, they kind of just go through the motions, or it didn't stick, and they come out and they still have those struggles. So it's very good that that was a great process for you. So you now have worked on yourself and you work with other people, but I want to kind of talk about that, uh, the binge eating disorder, like the patterns that go with it. Like, are you seeking just, because that's not something that I struggle with. So are you seeking just like a joyful moment? Like, I don't understand, I guess, the process of that disorder. So in your work with yourself and with other people, is there like a pattern that everybody kind of shares at least at baseline?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's similarities, yeah, there's some sort of, I would say that, over time I've talked with a lot of people, and some people have certain nuances that I think are different. I think by and large, my experience, and that of the majority of people, is that it is a dissociative experience. Um, and it can be that you are feeling, I mean, okay, it can be that you are tired. It can be stressed, it could be that, like, things just don't feel manageable, but you can be lonely, you can be alone. But some people, it's like, it can be when you're even happy or whatever. It can just be like, kind of like a habit, you know? So I feel like it doesn't always have to be emotional. And that's where I've had a little bit of difficulties or challenges working with therapists at the beginning, because because I think a lot of therapists will overly blame emotions for everything. Like, oh, well, you binge, what's really going on? Like, what's behind this? There was, you experienced an urge to binge, and then you binged, but what was that urge really about? What love were you seeking, or something? Was it about your dad, or, something? And I was like, oh my God, like, I'm out of here, because I just didn't resonate with that. It can be that sort of approach, but I think what also resonates with me, and that I think can happen for many people, is it becomes a habit. And I'm sure that you understand, since you work with the ketogenic diet, and understand how ultra processed foods impact us. If we're binging on junk food, for example, ice cream, cookies, whatever, all this stuff, it's natural that the next day you're going to have insane cravings. And it's not necessarily that you're feeling upset about something that someone said to you when you were 5 years old. It could just be physiological driver. It could just be that your body's like, you know, we want the junk food, like, in your neurotransmitters are getting a little crazy, right? So But I think in general, it's like, it could be that you want to feel something. It could be that you want to feel nothing. It could be that it's just a habit. But basically, I would always feel just this it's like this tunnel vision, right? And then you just feel like this compulsion of, for me, it's like I needed to get my keys and go to the store because I wouldn't keep the binge foods in the house. But then it's like you go now, you go to the store now, and you feel like you're just like like you're just like a puppet. And so you're being like pulled. And I think that a lot, you don't really have conscious thought. It's just kind of like this feeling taking over you. Yeah. So I think that's oftentimes what happens. It just happens, that's basically what happens. You're not thinking, it just happens.
Yeah, yeah. And you said that it just takes over and you don't have any
Yeah.
control over it. So yeah, I understand that. And the way you talk about this, where therapists want to overly blame emotions, is what you said. So
Yeah.
that kind of leads me to what makes what you do and how you work with people different than, say, going through a therapy process.
Right. Yeah. And so that is one unique focus, is that I'm very present moment focused. I think that maybe so I'm not a trauma therapist, but I think there is, if someone feels like they really want to do trauma therapy, I by all means support it. Absolutely. But I don't necessarily think that to go in the past and go through trauma has to be the way to recover, which I think is the overarching sort of paradigm that exists right now, is like, if you want to recover, we have to go through the past and go through the trauma and all that sort of thing. Whereas I think that's not true. And there are other PhDs and thought leaders who agree with that. It is a present moment pattern. And yes, it might be deeply ingrained because it's been around for a long time. But the only time that we can ever interrupt patterns is right now, right? So one of the things that is unique about what I offer is that I focus a lot on sensory strategies, because that has been so instrumental in my own healing, and then I've seen this help others. And no one had ever been talking about sensory strategies in the context of eating disorder behaviors until me, and so that's something that I think is, and then when I talk about it, people are like, oh, duh, that makes total sense, right? It makes a lot of sense, but like people hadn't been talking about it like that. So sensory strategies, and again, this is not necessarily like quote unquote somatic sort of things like, oh, put my hand on my heart and imagine what my inner child needs. Like, no, but like just present moment focus. Like, for example, I have this tapper tool that you could just like tap your body, and like this being really regulating for me, right? So for me, I found that shaking my body, tapping my body, doing bigger, larger proprioceptive movements, those help me to regulate. So it can be just something as simple as enhancing our ability to stay present in the moment. And then we find that we're able to move through patterns. So for example, for me, urges and cravings was a big thing. And I had done so much mindfulness and urge surfing, different cognitive techniques, and they just, like, none of the techniques felt strong enough to withstand what the visceral, like really deeply somatic sensation of the urge. But when I started to use body-based strategies, such as squeezing myself and that sort of thing, I just felt like, "Ah, I'm here, like I'm in my body, you know I can be with this feeling because like this actually feels supportive enough to help me to get through this moment, right? So I bring a deep understanding of and helping people to learn maybe sensory modalities that might work for them and what it could take to actually get through an urge or a compulsion or craving or what that's called. And I have a unique framework that I have put together. Would you like me to briefly give you the
Well,
rundown?
I do want to, yes, I definitely want to hear that, but I think I need to back up a step and
Yeah,
have you explain to me what somatic psychology is. So
yeah,
it's about being, I guess, in your moment, and there's a lot of like touch or movement involved. Is that
yeah,
okay?
yeah. So somatic psychology really somatic psychology is interesting, like to put those two words side by side, because psychology is like you think of the mind, right? And somatic actually means body, right? So why would you body mind, like how, what is that? That doesn't seem to make sense. But somatic psychology basically is sort of acknowledging the the relationship, how these things influence each other, how the mind can influence the body can influence the mind. So, for example, in the example that I just said, which was about cravings, so we could think of cravings maybe as like a cognitive state of, a state. We could imagine it, a somatic state as well. But if we think about the mental aspects, we could think about the angst, we could think about the rumination, we could think about different things that are happening in the mind when we're experiencing a craving. And so we could take a cognitive route to deal with the craving and be like, let's reframe that craving. Remember, that junk food is, poison or whatever, or just remember your goals. You had said that you weren't going to binge or whatever. We could think about things cognitively, or like, hey, remember that the cravings don't last forever. If you can get through the next 20 minutes, it should be significantly decreased. So those are all cognitive ways to deal with craving. And then when we think about somatic strategies, and like these are some of the things that we would talk about in somatic psychology, is like, how can we, revisit things or influence things using the body? And so, for example, what if I can focus on my feet, or, what if I can give myself some self-touch, different ways, and like, oh, actually, I notice I'm feeling a little bit soothed right now. Like if I focus on my feet on the ground and this hand on my heart, then maybe I can be like, yeah, I don't need it right now, because I notice like I'm finding myself more calm. I can give myself the care that I need, that the shit that I was gonna, you know, provide to myself actually doesn't give myself true care or something. So that's kind of like the type of thing that we could work with. Somatic psychologists, they can work with touch, they can work with movement. Yeah, so that's somatic psychology.
Yeah, I'm glad you explained that because this is really like my first experience with it. And I work with people, as you noted earlier, that do struggle. And it's like, all I can think of had, because I'm coming from this, my own background is having bipolar disorder and going through counseling and all that kind of stuff, is
Yeah.
to go, oh, we need to work through these feelings. But it seems like
Mm,
what you're doing, it just grounds you just
yeah,
right then and there. And you
right,
don't necessarily, I mean, I think probably it doesn't hurt to eventually kind of acknowledge the emotions at some point, but it's
right.
certainly acknowledging the emotions and being in real time with an emotion are really two very separate things, and you are kind of connecting that space there. So it's fascinating to me. So tell me more about your unique recovery model.
Yeah, so this is something that I think is just me pulling together just elements from my background, right? So the fact that I was a professional athlete, the fact that I, have my master's in exercise science and have my PhD in psychology, and also was a former severe binge eater, food addict, like all these sort of things, um, like really have made me come up with like a really unique toolbox. It's because it's like, yeah, and having a background in mindfulness, like, yeah, there's just like so much that I'm like, oh, I like this little piece, I like this, I like this, I like this. And so I have a basically a framework that I have put together that I think helps people to imagine or support recovery in a different way. And they can all be done. Like, it could be that just one piece of this framework is that the game changer for them. But it's kind of also like, well, if this is not the thing that works for you, because oftentimes it's not one thing that works. Like I did like a million freaking things until things started to kind of, things started to get put into place. So it's like, well, if it's not this, let's try this. So that's kind of where what this is about. So the first element that I think is important is just having foundational understanding of, for example, things like basic neuroscience. And so, for example, neuroplasticity, just knowing that we can change, like having the hope that we can change our brain, like that is definitely possible no matter what age you are, no matter how long you've been binging. The science around urges, for example, like knowing that they will fade over time, knowing that even though it feels like you have to act on them, you really don't, knowing that urges don't mean anything bad about you or that you didn't do anything wrong, like just certain sort of like foundational truths that can actually be really helpful for someone to know. The truth about curiosity and compassion, like being really helpful in recovery, not just like as like a woo thing, but like there's science behind that this is actually really helpful to, help us take all opportunities as learning, to not just be like, oh man, I fucked up again. Like just and turn that into like an opportunity for self-recrimination and shaming, but like to take every sort of instance and be like, okay, what can I learn from that, right? So I would just call that sort of like foundational understandings about things. Then I think the next important element would be nutrition. And my stance, or my primary sort of orientation, is abstinent animal-based nutrition. And I don't necessarily think that has to be for everyone. Like, I'm not going to say everyone has to be carnivore or whatever, because I believe there's different paths to healing. But for me, and so because I have deep knowledge about this, I love abstinent animal-based nutrition, and abstinent just meaning a person's definition of abstinence, right? So eliminating their trigger foods, whatever that means for them, right? And so avoiding ultra processed foods, doing things to stabilize our blood sugar, and that can reduce our cravings. And then I would say mindful eating is an important pillar, because that alone, like I said, each nutrition alone, that could do so much for people, right? But if not, let's add in mindful eating. And mindful eating, just the process of being present with your food, removing distraction, that can be so transformative for people who have problems with addictive, problems with food, or dissociating with food, if they're just like on this autopilot, right? So to work on mindful eating can be a complete game changer. And if that's not enough, just really developing urge awareness. So like developing awareness of how urges feel in their body, the habit loops, like what are the situations or the emotions or the people that they're with, or whatever, all the different, contexts or whatever that are part of their unique sort of urge phenotype, because each person is going to have a different sort of like experience about urges. So for them to know their own, that can help them to identify early warning signs and be able to intervene early to shore up support, right? And then there are sensory strategies, which we already talked about, which I think is a cool thing that everyone can benefit from, like you were saying, grounding. It really helps people. But essentially, sensory strategies are just a form of helping people regulate their nervous system. So it doesn't have to be that. It could just be other ways of, being able to regulate themselves. And that could be, reaching out to friends. It could be cognitive strategies. It could be whatever, different sort of things to improve their own regulation. Then there's optimizing health, which brings in my background as an athlete and, someone I'm still extremely, extremely passionate about this stuff. Like, I'm a total gym rat. I'm like all about this stuff. So that's stuff like, attention to circadian rhythm, improving sleep, movement, exercise, and not just like exercise, like going to the gym, but like movement throughout the day. And that can include mobility, that can include weights, that can include cardio, that can just include just, like things that you don't think about as um, as exercise, really, just like not staying seated all day. Do you know Katie Bowman, by the way?
I do not.
Okay, well, you should check her out because
Okay.
she has a book called Move Your DNA. She's a PhD in biomechanics, and she has a cool book, and she really practices what she preaches. Like, so she'll like, be on the computer, but she's like crouching down, like she's in a squat. She's doing crazy things. She like has her house designed in a certain way to really have her, have her body in creative ways, not just kind of like
Yeah, the
stagnant.
more I find myself sitting in front of this desk doing this thing, I need to learn that. So that sounds like, thank you for the tip.
Yeah, totally. Me too. I sit way too much. So yeah, just so different things to optimize health. Then there's self-compassion, which is so crucial. And that is something that we could all use as well. And then there's a pillar that I just call deepening recovery, which is kind of like a catch-all, but that's sort of like when we feel a bit more stabilized, like ways that we can kind of like ensure a more sustainable recovery. So for example, voluntary discomfort practices, which would be essentially like, widening your window of tolerance. So for example, can you be with uncomfortable sensations a little bit longer? So for example, in the form of, let's say, a cold plunge or exercise or just small ways or meditation, like small things just to help you to improve your ability to be with discomfort. Because oftentimes people who struggle with, eating disorders, it's really hard to be with discomfort. And then deepening recovery can include working on new narratives, like new stories, like storytelling about who we are and what our life is about, connection, giving back, service, support, like all that sort of thing. So those are sort of some unique ways that I consider how we can support recovery in ways that just go beyond the traditional, which I think is kind of like cognitive behavioral therapy and just like sort of in a lot of meetings. But for me, I'm kind of like, I kind of think about things through a different lens based upon my background,
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. So I often talk about like building a good foundation, and then pillars often come up in that conversation. But I wrote down 8 different
Yes. Yeah.
pillars here. That
Yeah.
is a strong foundation. This isn't a 3-pillar system. This is an 8-pillar system. This is very, very, it's built to last. And that I can tell that just by writing these pillars down for myself. So I do have a couple of questions just about those pillars. Like you talk about mindful eating. How can someone, show me an example of what mindful eating looks like?
Yeah. So I think first thing is leave your fucking phone in the other room. Like,
Love
dude,
that.
how many of us just like on the autopilot or just have our phone with us 24/7, and then we just like are sitting down, maybe the phone's turned up or maybe the phone's turned down, but then you hear something, you turn it up, next thing you know, you're on your phone. Or just maybe some of us have the habit of just scrolling, like, so yeah, just scrolling and eating, like that's totally, I mean, I think that's totally common. So I would say just number one is just leaving your phone in the other room. That's kind of, that's a big one, it's
Yes, that's huge. Yeah.
right. Like, it's
I
not
mean,
like,
how often do I go to a restaurant and I just see like a whole table, like a family
I
of 4,
know.
and everyone has their face in the phone?
Exactly.
Yeah. And it
Exactly.
happens to me all the time. Yeah.
Right.
You do it
Yeah.
without thinking about it, right?
Right. Yeah.
You're so used to it.
Yeah. So I think just trying to like develop moments of awareness. And it's not like you have to, do the whole meal without a phone, because I know, especially for someone who's never done this before, that might feel truly agonizing. So it can just be 1 minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes, like let's say the first minute of the meal, like, let's say that you put the phone just out of reach, and then you do, 1 to 3 minutes, without the phone, and then you grab the phone and you scroll for the rest of the meal, but just to have that experience of a few moments of presence is
Which also kind of does that, put yourself in an uncomfortable position too. So it kind of does both, hits both things
I
a little
mean,
bit.
it's not like we want an uncomfortable position. I mean, it's not like we want to be uncomfortable. It's good. I think it's good to, have a little bit of discomfort so that we can,
Yeah.
work with that. But it's interesting that you said that, because I think that a lot of people think that mindful eating is just about like we should be like in some Zen state or something, like, oh, I'm so blissful, like I'm here and I'm smelling everything and I'm tasting every flavor burst in my mouth, or something. I think that some people think that's what it has to be, but the reality is that it can be a bit uncomfortable just because it's something different and new. And like, maybe it's kind of boring, honestly. You're like, oh man, it's boring to just be with my food. But I think in instances of people who are trying to recover, that's okay. That's okay for it to be boring, because you know we we're in this pattern of just like eating quickly and distractedly, and we're just, this leads to the next thing, then we're opening the cupboards, and then maybe we're going to the store or whatever. So anything that we can do to sort of interrupt that pattern and like keep our eyes wide open, to not let ourselves just kind of like go into that, the blinders and the autopilot. I think that's oftentimes what we need. But like, even just a moment, for anyone who's listening, even just a moment of just presence can be really helpful. Just, taking a look at your plate and just noticing, what does your plate look like, is a good
Yeah.
start. Yeah.
Yeah. I once had a friend, this was before the cell phone like was everything. So I think cell phones existed. I just don't think everybody had one at the time. But she was like, I always eat out of a bowl because that experience, just holding the bowl and cupping the bowl, it makes me a little bit closer to the food. And I've noticed
Mm,
myself doing that a lot more. Like my husband will eat his food on a plate. And I'm like, no, put mine in a bowl. I don't know what that is. It's just like that connection to it. Like I'm holding it.
mm,
But I am struggling with the cell phone bit. So maybe I need to do the
yeah.
bowl and the cell phone thing so I can
Mhm, mhm,
try to be
mhm.
in that moment a little bit more. So that's interesting. And I'm really finding all of this. It's different to me. It's new to me. So it does seem like it it brings you more in touch, these processes. It just brings you more in touch with kind of your overall sense and like your space in the world and what you're doing, instead of I have to go back and revisit this thing and I have to handle this thing or I have to work on, like, I can just be with myself and be
Yeah,
okay with who I am.
yeah,
And this thing might trigger me or this urge might come, but I can make myself feel safe without needing to lean on all of these other things because I have this great foundation. So,
yeah.
yeah, I can see why this works for you, and I can see why it helps a lot of other people that you work with. So, we talked before we went live that you have some different classes that you teach. So tell me more about those classes.
Yeah. So, um, I feel very inspired. I think that's where it all comes from. I feel inspired. And so there's some classes that I teach that are ones that I am certified in, and then there's some classes that I teach that I have created. Um, so so for example, Conscious Bites is a course that I created. It's an original course, and it is about mindful eating and mindful living within abstinence-based recovery. And the reason I created that course is because in my own exploration of mindful eating, I felt that the narrative was so um, muddied, I guess is the right word, with narratives of moderation, which was not what I was seeking or felt like was helpful to me. So it would say, like, when we're talking about, I would read things about mindful eating and it'd be like, you know, we're doing this so that you can enjoy how to savor half a cookie. And it's like, wait, but my goal is not to savor half a cookie. What if my goal is to have presence around me eating a steak or whatever? Why does it have to be about, I'm doing this mindful eating so that I can learn to moderate all foods, like that didn't feel aligned with me. And so I basically pulled in a lot of things that I have learned around mindful eating and somatic practices and so forth, um, and helped, basically talk about mindful eating for people who identify as abstainers, mostly with, people who have issues with food addiction, or binge eating or some sort of disordered eating with food. And so it was mindful eating, but not just mindful eating, because as you know, it's not just the moment that you put the fork to your mouth that eating behaviors are sort of perpetuated, right? So it was also there's also like practices to build awareness in everyday life, so it's not just such a shock like, oh, I'm running through my day and I'm crazy, and then it's not going to feel natural to have a mindful meal, right? So building awareness in everyday life, building resiliency, building your toolkit for things that help you, considering things in your life as far as what might you need to take out of your life to help you secure your abstinence, what might you want to bring into your life. So that's the Conscious Bites course. And right now I'm teaching alongside Clarissa Kennedy of Sweet Sobriety. We are co-teaching Befriending Your Body, which is a course created by Dr. Ann Biasetti, who is a somatic psychotherapist. And it is a class that helps us to develop very subtle attunement to our body. And it is also with the aim of sort of recovering from disordered eating, but it talks a lot about, it facilitates the participants' exploration of their own interoceptive awareness and really cultivating self-compassion. And then I am probably in the spring going to be teaching mindfulness-based relapse prevention, which I freaking love. When I got certified in that, I just felt such a resonance. And even though it's not historically taught in the context of food stuff, it's more like drugs and alcohol, like substance use stuff, I just felt like every single word was perfectly aligned. Like, just replace the word, drug or whatever with food. And I was like, oh my God, this is perfect. I just really loved the course, the teachings, and yeah, so I am excited to share that. And then I also have a course that I created that is an original course that is called Feel and Flow. And that is like a more creative, sort of expressive, a little bit more athletic course, because it is related to using the body to help us to connect to ourselves, but it uses things like, for example, getting down on the ground, slithering around, and doing like dancing on the floor, like in your own way, to, for example, reflect certain adjectives or to express oneself. And it could, for example, use soft tissue work, like using self-myofascial release or hip stretches or different sort of things to reflect on, like, how is that feeling? How might I describe that? So to kind of help to cultivate body literacy. So it's a bit more active. And so, yeah, it's kind of a little bit more of a blend between like movement and like developing awareness and self-expression, more so than the other courses are a little bit more focused on eating disorders and are a little bit, not as active.
Sorry, I muted myself because my doggies decided to bark
No
incessantly.
problem.
So, so your courses, do you offer like online presences as
They're
well, or is it
online.
all in person? Or
No, it's all online. Yeah, I haven't, one day when I like find my forever home, I don't know if I ever will or whatever, but for right now I'm just doing online. And then, yeah, maybe when I feel like I'm set and like want to open like like a center or something, then I could invite people to come to me. But for right now, it's all on Zoom.
well, you know what? That means you can just reach more people because it's not limited to just your area. So that's why I wanted to make sure I asked that. So before we move on to your next idea, where can people find you and connect with these classes?
Yeah, so everything is at my website, which is beyondbingeeating.com. And actually, it's not my web person, I gotta say, she's great, but she's a little slow. So everything is not, we're working behind the scenes to get it updated, but she takes her time, is what I gotta say. So if it's not, it might not be on the website at this moment, but it's all in the process of trying to get every offering that I have, of the courses and, meditations for sale or different tools for sale. Like I'm working to get that up, but it might not all be there at the moment, but certainly beyondbingeeating.com is how people can get a hold of me if they have any questions on anything. And soon I hope to have these offerings all up there. And I have a free newsletter, which is beyondbingeeating.com/newsletter. And so then people can know like what's coming up. But I welcome if anyone wants to email me, it's info@beyondbingeeating.com.
Awesome. So, and yeah, I've been looking at your website a lot, and yeah, I noticed there's only one of those classes on there, but I
Right,
wouldn't have
right.
paid, I wouldn't have known, right? Because it's not there.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, but the other things that you have on there is certainly, it's not like don't go to the website because it's missing 3 classes. It's
Right.
go to the website because there's still a lot of very
Yeah.
useful information.
Thank you.
Obviously, links to your podcast are on
Yeah.
there as well,
Yeah.
which is very useful information. You have some free resources and tools, and your blog,
Yeah.
what you're writing in your blog, it's just very informative. So
Oh, thanks so much.
definitely, yeah, don't just skip it because there's some things we know some things are missing. There's things that
Yeah.
are there, and then sign up for the newsletter, and when it's all updated, you'll know then. So
Oh,
it's on a
thank
need
you.
to know basis right now.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah,
Robyn.
of course. So we talked about, and you want to put this out into the world. So what
Yeah.
is your vision for the future?
Okay. I don't know if I'm going to call it a vision. I will call it a dream.
Okay.
But yeah, something that I'm interested in and have been interested in for a little bit is a retreat center. A retreat center that specializes in kind of like keto. I don't know what you want to call it. Keto, low carb, carnivore, primal, something like that. But basically, I feel like there's an absence of that available for people seeking a safe space, a healthy space, a joyful space, but they don't want to go on a fucking juice fast, or they don't want to go and have some like gourmet whatever things with, I don't know. I don't even know what to call this stuff. But yeah, everyone's entitled to their own opinion of what feels healthy for them. So if people want to go and they have like the gourmet whatever special breads with, and they have the fruits and do the juice fast or whatever, that's cool. Or vegan retreats, vegan yoga retreats, whatever. It's cool. But like I I basically I guess I feel like I would want to create it just because this is something that I would want for myself that doesn't exist, And I feel like, well, maybe I'm not the only person in the world who wants this, right? So if I want to go to a place and that has cool shit and we have, movement, maybe there's qigong, maybe it's some sort of movement, maybe it's yoga, maybe it's not, but like awesome things that promote health, access to healing nature, um, different workshops, that sort of thing, but that offers food that feels nourishing. Like that's what I want to offer. And so, like, yeah, there's like awesome yoga retreats in nature, but then it's like we offer vegan or vegetarian. We offer accommodations, but like obviously, if you're like, well, I require meat at every meal, they're going to be like, no, So it's like any accommodation, but not carnivore. And so I was like, okay, but how about there are people like you can do yoga and not be a vegan or vegetarian, or like same thing with meditation retreats. I would want to go to a meditation retreat, but oftentimes you're just sitting. You're sitting for hours and hours, and then you get like a bowl of rice or something. It's like, wait, well, what if I want to do a meditation retreat, but I also want to feel like my body's nourished and I want to eat some steak or something like that. So I'd want to offer that opportunity. So um, I would love to have a retreat center and maybe have different weeks for different folks. So maybe there's a yoga retreat that's carnivore, right? Or keto, low carb, primal, something like that, but just not vegan, vegetarian, juice fasting, like type of nothing that's gonna get you in trouble if you're feeling like, oh, I don't want to be around that stuff. There's not going to be cacao desserts or anything like that, right? And then maybe there's another week that's for people who are wanting to solidify their recovery from sugar addiction or binge eating, and so they they feel intrigued by the potential of like therapeutically ketogenic diets, but they don't know how to do it, and it feels like it's too much work. But like, if we could give them the food, they just show up and then they receive, they come to the movement classes, they're in nature, they're getting appropriate light exposure, they're eating these healthy foods, and then they can feel the difference and then go home and do that themselves. So yeah, like different, or like a week that's focused on like meditation practices or whatever, but not feeling like, oh man, the only way that I'm going to be able to do this is wrecking my body and just staying still for like hours and hours and like eating whatever food that they have available. So I I am interested in this, but there's some things that have to be done first. Like first, I have to find a place, which would mean I would need to travel. So so yeah, I've been very busy, so I haven't traveled in a long time. But that's something that I would like to do is find a place. And yeah, so there's a lot that would go into it, like I
So
wanted
you
to.
do this like amazing idea, and then at the end of it, you have like a roadblock, like a built-in roadblock. So I want you to say that whole thing and then remove the roadblock, because this is an amazing idea. I mean,
No.
let's just for the sake of a weird word say these are woo-woo things, right? Like people
Okay.
think it's woo-woo when it's really not. But there are people, like there's this almost like this stigma that it's like the vegan people do these things and the meat eaters do these things.
Right.
But that's not
No.
true. There's
Yeah.
plenty of people who are eating the meat that want to go do those things
Right.
that
Right.
yeah. I know people who have tried to go on retreats and just basically didn't, well, I just turned it into a fast. And then especially if it's like something like a yoga retreat and you're moving your body and you're
Right.
putting yourself in all of these positions, you really need the protein to kind of back that up.
Right.
And
Right.
instead you're fasting.
Right.
It's really not a good mix. So I think it's a fabulous idea.
Oh,
No
yeah.
more roadblocks. It'll
Oh,
happen.
thanks. Yeah. So yeah, I do plan to do some travel this upcoming year to do some scouting. And if, this is you know, the first time I've talked about this in public. So if there's anyone who wants to collaborate, then I welcome you to contact me. If there's anyone who's interested in attending a retreat like this, I welcome you to contact me. So let's make this a reality, you guys.
Let's totally make it happen. So I had had a guest who she did the low carb for better health conference, and
Oh,
that's part
mhm.
of what she does. She tries to make it, so they have it's at a retreat center. They have all the food there, so it's within the keto guidelines. She had people lead movement, she had people lead
Cool.
different things, as well as like have the educational, like sit in
Mm-hmm.
the conference,
Mm-hmm.
have people talk to you a bit.
Awesome.
So I mean, I feel like it's happening. We just need to get you connected to all those people, and perhaps, I mean, I can see you working with her and making something like that happen, like adding those pieces to it, at least to get a good start on how that might look. So I'll give you her information after
Awesome.
we talk. So uh, it's been, I mean, like you've really opened my eyes to just like a whole new way of thinking about this, like how to manage kind of everything like now instead of, yeah, I mean, it's a whole new experience for me. So I'm really glad that we got to talk about this and you got to share how your like focus and you're really changing the way we deal with binge eating disorder and food addiction. I mean, there's a lot of different ideas that are out there, and this is this one is it's a good one. So, you know what I mean? Like, there are things that work, that different things work for different people. And
Yeah.
having this other approach is certainly a great approach to lean on for someone. I feel like I'm sure you're helping a lot of people, and I hope that people who are listening know that they can contact you and learn more, because yeah, it's pretty awesome. So I'd like to ask this question at the end of my show, and it's, what advice can you share to help others write their keto biography and start their healing journey?
So funny now that you say that, I realized I didn't really talk too much about my keto biography. Yeah, so just a tiny bit about that. My keto biography, essentially, a little bit about like when I started carnivore. So I had been doing, low carb for a long, long time, but then I really started carnivore when I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition. And that, coupled with the fact that I had heard a lot of people talking about um, carnivore helped them with their binge eating and food addiction, um, that made me just be like, I don't care that people, have been saying that, or just I got the idea that carnivore is like super extreme. Oh, this is disordered, because people have been telling me I need to moderate. So I had avoided it for a long time. But then really my autoimmune diagnosis was what kind of like, I was like, I don't care. I'm going to try it for 30 days and see if this helps with my addictive patterns and with the autoimmune. And I basically never turned back. And but I think it really took a step for me to kind of like be courageous and kind of be like, I don't care what other people say or think. Like I had to kind of take a step in sort of like autonomy, sort of like just trusting myself. And instead of being like, oh, well, people think this is weird, or people would say that this is not good for me, this is disordered. But I really just had to shuck that and just be like, I'm going to try this for me. I'm doing this for me. And it has been, really super helpful. Like, as I told you, this has been one of the pillars for me in my recovery, because it's, like, I know something works for me. And so I think that for someone who is curious about eating a keto way, or some variation thereof, it really is sort of different than the mainstream, which is kind of crazy to think that like the mainstream is Mickey D's and whatever. But people, if you bring a Tupperware with like, your steak or something, they're going to look at you so much weirder than if you bring a Happy Meal. And that's just the reality of it. So you're doing something different by you making the choice to cut out ultra processed foods, eating keto. And I would just encourage people to like own it, just to be like, just not to be like, you don't have to be like to fight people, you don't have to be like, oh well, fuck you or anything like that, but just to own it. Like, hey, I'm doing something different, I'm doing this for my own health, I'm making the choice for myself, you can do what you want to do, I'm going to do this for me. Like, let's keep our eyes on our own plates. You eat what you want, you eat your McDonald's, I'm going to eat my steak, and like, let's just coexist peacefully. I mean, obviously we would want something better for the world in the future, but for now, let's just let everyone make their own decisions. And it's going to take a bit of courage to do it that way, because maybe at first people might say something, or they might look at you, or they might try to like be a food pusher and be like, oh well, why don't you eat this, it's, you can just a bite, or this or that, so I think you just have to kind of develop this sort of like this I'm not sure what the right word is, maybe you can help me with that, but like resilience or courage, just kind of like independence, just like this mindset of like, I'm different and that's okay.
I always tell people to hold themselves to a standard. It's
Mhm.
like we really have oh, we need to value ourselves enough that all of that other noise doesn't matter. So if you have this specific standard for yourself, somebody could offer the thing to you and you'll be like, no, it's
Yeah.
just not what I do. I really like that that was the answer to your question, because it's not that it kind of, I would say for people who are kind of eating this way, especially for the first time, that's probably the hardest piece, is that you're
Yeah.
different. Now you've created different or weird, or I'm not socially acceptable, and
Right.
I've ostracized myself and I can't participate in my family things and my friend
Right.
things, and I just have to sit at home. And it doesn't have to be that way.
Right. I mean,
But
we all want to fit in, you know.
yeah,
But yeah, if we really want to take this courageous step, we have to be okay with being different. And maybe we're inspiring someone else, you know, in their health journey.
yeah, different isn't weird, it's inspiring.
Mhm.
Just a reframe of that thought. So
Right. Right.
yeah. Yeah. Well, Kristina, it's been lovely talking to you. Thank you so much for joining Ketobiography today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Robyn.
Of course. All right. Bye.
Bye.